My notes for the first couple episodes are basically, what is this? What is I'm here for this? I'm not here for this. What is this? Like, the art style is so unique, and for that it should be praised. Yeah, because the detail is so excruciating and every punch is like done to feel weighty because these are like the best of the best. It's like, oh no, that guy's dead. Oh
It's
no, he's fine.
it's almost like if someone was getting a Mortal Kombat fatality in real life, and then they just kind of
With
stood
every
up.
blow.
Yeah,
With every
and then they just stand up and they're fine.
like every blow is like a Mortal Kombat X style crushing blow. Like, it is insane.
Hello and welcome to Add It to the List, the podcast where we binge watch a season of an anime and then talk about whether or not it should go on your watch list. I'm Forrest, and with me, as always, today is Jack.
Hello.
Beware of spoilers for the first season of Baki. We watched the first season of the Netflix Baki anime, which, for those who don't know, is technically the third major arc of the Baki series, but this show was developed to be on Netflix, as far as I understand. But anyway, Jack, what did you know about Baki before this?
I had heard of it in myth and legend. It was one of those shows that, like, when people found out that, like, you had seen JoJo's, or, like, once you get the reputation of liking big, dumb muscle boy animes, people are like, oh, you have to watch Baki. And that's about it. I know that you liked it. That's also about it. I was not surprised, but I was taken aback by what I ended up consuming. How about you?
I was aware of Baki, but I am not sure why, honestly. I think I just kind of had heard about it, seen people discuss it, and then just randomly I decided to watch it. Because this is a show that I've watched already, which I didn't mention. I watched all of the anime not that long ago, before I moved, but there is an anime from like 2000 to 2001, and I watched that. I liked that a lot, and so then I continued on to the Netflix anime, but I literally knew nothing about it. It was just a wild ride. The thing about Baki is that I would not say that it is good, but it is an experience to be had. And whether or not you like shonen anime or anything of that sort, sports anime, fighting anime, like, this is just kind of that on steroids, because all of the characters look like they're on steroids.
Not even. Like, in order to consume the amount of steroids to get that body, you would have died. Not from the steroids' effect on your body, but just by taking that much of anything at all.
But as we were briefly discussing before we started recording, none of these people can die, really, somehow. Anyway, we should probably...
They're true martial artists.
I guess we can give a brief rundown of this season in particular.
Before we get into it,
like, spoiler-free.
This is a weird note, or this is a weird one to give a trigger warning for, because it legitimately has one. It's gory in a way that's unnecessary. Like, the art style, and we'll all talk about it, but, like, the art style in general just, like, really gets off on strange details. So, like, when people bleed, when punches hit face, when somebody has their face flesh ripped off, like, it goes hard for no reason.
Well, I mean, that's kind of part of the art style of the manga too. like this show really struggles to replicate that. And I feel like when you're reading the manga, a lot of the visceral and very like just unnecessarily realistic portions are kind of just the artist flexing how he can draw absurd realism, I feel like, if that's what you could call the art style for this series. And the show really tries to encapsulate that, but then at the same time, since it is animated, it just looks just really gross. Um,
So yeah, if gore is a thing that bothers you, there's a surprising amount of it for a punch anime.
yeah. I mean, I on the topic of um, trigger warnings, there is in the later half of this first season, because this first season is split into two parts and they're both 13 episodes. There is a lot of sexual topics in the second half.
Oh no! Given where we end episode 13, I was afraid that would be the case. We're only
Yeah.
talking about the first 13, so but like
Yeah, and I will briefly like touch on that part and maybe just give Jack a rundown of what happens. But yeah, that is a trigger warning. Basically, just intense violence, some sexual themes, um, abuse, maybe not as much in this because like the whole like prior story in Baki's life is really just messed up, and his father is incredibly messed up as well. Yeah, but the brief rundown of this season is basically there's these 5 death row inmates, all from different countries. One of them is from the United States, one of them is French, one of them is Russian, one of them is Japanese, and then one of them is, I'm not sure where Speck was from. Do you remember where Speck was from?
I do not know where Speck was from, but one of them is either Scottish or Irish. I forget which, but Doyle is from one of them.
I thought Doyle was French.
I mean, it would explain his turtleneck, but Doyle is definitely an Irish name, which is why I just threw that out there. I know that because that was my maiden name.
Anyway, their names are Speck, Doyle, Yanagi, Sikorsky, and Dorian.
Brief aside, this first 13 spend a lot of time on Speck and Dorian. Dorian is my favorite and least favorite villain in most, like, honestly, top 5. Because he has little to no motivation and he looks gross. So,
I mean, I think that we can like kind of get into the motivations of these characters first in this little brief summary.
I have thoughts on Dorian.
Basically, there's these 5 death row inmates that all escape from prison, from their respective prisons. Most of them escape when they are getting their death sentence, and that is just kind of a means for the author to be like, oh, look at this insane thing that these people survived. These are the strongest of the strong. And there's this whole long-winded explanation as to like why they're on their way to Japan.
It's actually a very good point for the trigger warnings. We watch a man get hung and a man get electric chaired.
Like they're getting the death penalty. Oh, and Hector Doyle was actually from the United Kingdom, I guess.
Haha!
I'm not sure where Speck was from yet. But basically, they survived these absurd situations really just as kind of a literary tool to show you just how absurd their strength is. I guess Speck was also from the U.S. Interesting. They all make their way to Japan because they all get this feeling, they call it synchronization, where there's like just a feeling amongst the strong people that there is someone that is stronger than them, and they all go to Japan.
And like it comes off of the heels of like an in-character monologue about how like spontaneously over the course of a day, all TNT had started to congeal in a way that they hadn't been able to figure out how to make it congeal before. And it's like,
This is
episode 1 does a very good job of going, we're in something.
yeah, that is, I feel like, the definition of Baki. We are just in something that basically leads to these people going to Japan because they have somehow learned that Baki, the main character, has recently become the champion of a major tournament that was literally the purpose of like finding one of the strongest martial artists that has ever lived. And Baki is approaching that level, but also Baki's goals, for those who don't know, are to defeat his father, who is currently known as the world's strongest being. His name is Yujiro Hanma, and he is a brick shithouse.
That's why the next part's called Baki Hanma. I get it now.
Yeah, Baki's last name is Hanma, obviously. These death row inmates basically just show up. Even though they're on death row, like, they're kind of just allowed to run free because, I mean, they're not like necessarily running free. Like, the police are still currently after them, but these people are just so strong that the police can't do anything.
Yeah, they escape with an ease which aggressively implies that they were there because they didn't feel like leaving, but it also makes me wonder how literally any of them got arrested.
And this is kind of a reoccurring thing in Baki, like on the heels of like the original series from 2001. This makes sense because there is a huge deal made about Baki's father having like been in the Vietnam War and like basically just single-handedly destroying entire armies, and like no man-made weapon could even phase him. Like rockets and missiles just couldn't do anything against him. Like he's just that strong, and that's like kind of a large portion of those first 2 seasons. So like the concept that there are these characters like this is kind of just the next step in that power scaling system. So it kind of makes sense when you have that context, but just like getting thrown into this is just like, it's just a wild ride. And they make attempts at making sure you are aware of prior events and knowledge. Like they will just outright tell you things.
They do be flashbacks,
which is good because most people who are seeing this probably have zero context for what Baki is at all.
I will say, as somebody who has zero context for what Baki is at all, the first couple episodes go super hard, but they do it in a way that I will say does, like, there's not a question in your mind that this is the power level. Like there is no like establishing relative strength. It's like, oh no, we passed the deep end a while ago. And you get it, and it's presented in a way that you're just like, yep, we're living in it.
I mean, for further context, like literally the first major fight for Baki when he's like 13 years old is this giant like prehistoric ape that lives in the mountains of Japan, and he goes and has to fist fight it when he's like 13 years old.
Ook, my guy. And
that actually comes back like that. So that's another thing that Baki does pretty well, is like making early characters relevant. Like all the characters feel like they kind of have a purpose, and the author definitely loves just writing fights for each character. Like they all just kind of get their chance to do something. And the end of this first season kind of wraps everything up in a very tight bun that like brings back a lot of things from those original seasons and stuff like that. And Baki, when he was like 13, also tried to fight his dad and just lost outright. Like it wasn't even a challenge for him. And that was kind of in a means to like show you just how far above the natural world Yujiro Hanma is.
And yeah, all of that's before this.
Yeah, this is all just kind of like background information, which I think is important for people that know nothing about Baki, because if you're listening to this, you're probably curious or want to know if it's any good. And I would highly suggest like watching those at some point. I just I see like Baki is not that great, but it's so easy to talk about.
You know, we may have jumped the shark about the whole list thing, but
Well, no, I know.
but you know, fair enough. Like fair dinkum, my guy.
We still have a lot to talk about.
We definitely do, and so
That's basically the gist of what this first season is about. It's just about fighting these death row convicts.
yeah, of which we get through 2 of them.
Yeah, in the first like 13 episodes, and the first of which is Spec.
Okay.
But I think we should just kind of
Talk about how much Spec pisses. There's a lot of piss in this show.
I feel like we're already going into the spoilery territory. So
I don't know if character pisses a punch is enough. We've talked about like real character moments in pre-spoilers before. The fact that Spec pisses like an opened fire hydrant, I don't think is a spoiler. Also, it happens in episode 2.
No, yeah. I'm not saying that in particular is a spoiler, but so I think we should discuss the things that we liked or disliked about this first half of the season.
Yeah. Before we go into like hard likes, hard dislike, I'm so torn with the animation style because
I'm torn.
It has its strengths. Like
I'm just
there is some delightful detail, and the way that some of like the harder outlines, which are a little bit inconsistent, but like they sort of add to like a whole style. People are very jacked but also round feeling, and like sometimes when people throw it particularly impactful punches, like they look like the bit of their body that hit the person is stiff and the rest of them are limp. Like there's some really freaking funny like keyframes, and like they linger on them like boom type. And like those moments, like my notes for the first couple episodes are basically, what is this? What is I'm here for this? I'm not here for this. What is this? Like the art style is so unique. And for that, it should be praised. It should not be praised for trying weird 3D CGI nonsense in 2018, years after we learned that 3D CGI nonsense is not good.
Well, I mean, that like raises a whole nother question about the production of this first season, because I probably didn't dig hard enough. I probably could have found something, but I was trying to research just the general production of this season, find out like a time frame for how long they had to animate it, or like what the budget was. I couldn't even find this listed in the credits on Wikipedia for the studio that produced it. I don't know what's going on there. I probably am just stupid, so just if someone does listen to this and they find something that I don't know, please tell me.
It's okay though, because you're real pretty.
Well, thank you. I couldn't find anything, and I just genuinely feel like it is so ugly. I think it was. I remember the first time I watched this season, I did not so viscerally react to just what it looks like, because I couldn't help but just constantly focus on how bad it looked on the second watch through. And I think that's just because I kind of already had knowledge of what was happening. I think when you're first watching it, so much is happening, and everything that is happening is absolutely insane that you just kind of don't focus on that part of it.
You do get lost in the spectacle.
And so, like, just a lot of the stills, just like all the characters are just kind of drawn consistently off model. Like you'll see a character show up, and then like the next time around they just look completely different. I swear to God.
You're not wrong. You're really not wrong. We were talking about this earlier. Like, one of the things that Berserk does well is that, as part of being a little work freak, God, everybody is so on model every time, to the point where, like, because you don't see Guts's face straight on, like most of the time it's at angles, The few times that you see him dead on, you're like, oh yeah, if his jaw is that wide at that angle, of course looking at him looks like you're staring at a rectangle. Which means that, like, the 2 times you see him straight on, that man is geometric, like only 90-degree angles,
Yeah,
which is the opposite of what happens in this show.
he is chiseled. And like the further into Berserk that you get, the more consistent Mira gets. Like you look at like a bunch of the drawings of Guts's face in a row, and like they just start to all look identical, and you're like, how is a man like just even conceivably possible of this much consistency?
Yeah, which is to say, the other side of the spectrum from this show. I think part of it is because whoever did the animation for this show is so here for detailing muscles. Like, every muscle that is conceivably on the human face is ripped for these men. And so sometimes it's less about the man's face and more about, well, from this angle, you'd see this muscle. Therefore, whatever jawbone, like, underlying structure is there that's unique to this person, nah, get that out the window. Let's show this muscle. I was actually thinking about this. Like, there's an episode where Baki's doing like a fitness exam at school, and we watch the gym teacher's cheeks deflate as he blows the whistle. And I remember it stuck out to me because that's an insane amount of detail. Like, this is a very detailed show. It is an insane amount of detail. But why is that teacher's face the exact same as everyone else's face when they tense up? Like, it's that level of it's to style, it's not to model.
I like haven't shown you like any of the manga art, but the manga art is on the level of Berserk in my opinion, in terms of it's just like insane consistency. He has a very weird style of anatomy, but like he draws every muscle just as you described, like toned to insanity. Like, but he consistently does it, and it makes no sense. And the further you get into the manga, like the more consistent he gets in that regard. And I think that it's just such an impossible art style to replicate in animation that although there are a lot of scenes where the characters, where you can see every muscle on a character's body, it's just like there's no way to really produce the manga art again.
Yeah. So I think the show in general, something that I will say I like about it is it knows what it is. Except for when it doesn't. But it knows what it is. Like, there's a little bit of a romance angle with Baki and a classmate that was established sometime in the last arc. Don't worry, you don't have to watch it. They give us the flashbacks. There's a romance angle there, but for the most part, no, we are here to watch these violent men do violence. And by God, does a lot of that happen. And so to that extent, the show is very earnest. But then it gets into like some weird deep meditation on what it means to be a martial artist, and like what, like the difference between being like a fighter and a competitor. Like, it kind of gets up itself in a way that just doesn't make sense. And they draw very asinine distinctions and then place so much in-universe relevance on those distinctions that like one of the characters basically regresses to the point of being a toddler when a very minute difference is pointed out. It breaks his psyche. And it's like, what is this? What happened? This was 2 minutes ago, sir. Stop it.
Well, I mean, I think I was thinking about that, and I actually like wrote a note about it, how like it tries to kind of be like a character study on like the psyche of these death row convicts, I feel like, because like they, and like emphasis on the word tries, it really wants to talk about these people and like why they are the way they are, and like how obsessed they are with their own strength, and how like their obsession with being defeated is kind of like the thing that motivates them to keep living. You know, like humans do kind of need something to keep themselves going, you know? And yes, it is just absurd that one person is like, you have never won a fight, and then that just breaks his psyche. But yeah, it gets ahead of itself in like trying to be very contemplative, but then at the same time it's just a shonen manga about people just hitting each other as hard as possible.
Yeah. And like I think part of the reason why the character study aspects fall flat is because there's not enough distinction between the convicts as far as their motivations go. Because realistically, like, yeah, they each have different backstories, but what we see them be motivated by is do a fight.
Yeah.
And like they all do a fight in slightly different ways, but like that's it. I'm here to fight, and fight I shall. Pow pow.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know where to like. Do we talk about like? I feel like we can really only talk about Spec and Dorian. I didn't. I like Spec a lot. I really don't like Dorian, mostly just because I find Dorian annoying. Like everything he does to me was just kind of like annoying.
I hate Spec, but I love Dorian because Spec is weird muscle Santa.
I mean, Spec is also just gross and disgusting. I think the only reason why I like Spec more is because I like the fight that he has more. Personally,
I liked his fight is better than any one Dorian fight, but that's because Dorian had one good fight worth of scenes spread out across like 6 episodes.
Yeah,
like
that's kind of a problem that the author also really runs into is these characters in giving a chance for like every character to shine. These death row convicts in particular just kind of like bounce from fighter to fighter. And they like either lose or they do something crazy and then they peace out. And then like another fighter gets a chance to fight them. So then it feels so much more drawn out than like with Spec. I felt much more satisfied because he kind of had one big fight and him and the character who fought him got a chance to shine. And then that was kind of the end of Spec's arc. But I guess I just feel like Dorian's whole arc is just very drawn out. Like, it did not need to be as long as it was. Like, why not just have all the characters line up in a line to fight him, and then everyone just go at him one at a time? Like, you're the writer. Just do that. Like, you don't have to, like, come up with these crazy different scenarios where they can fight each other. Like, just have them fight and then call it good. You know?
Yeah. And I definitely agree pacing wise and like general plot construction wise. What I will say, and what I will give a lot of credit to the author for, is that he uses the environment in which they are fighting very well. Like there's a fight in a park and that matters because someone gets to like ground themselves against a tree, or like he gets a trash can hurled. He gets a bench broken over his head and no sells it. Like everyone in this universe no-sells everything except for Baki, who goes down like a biatch.
And that's also kind of like the whole like defeat thing. Like,
so the main conceit of the first 13 episodes is that this little bald man that I'm sure Forrest has more context for, he's the guy who ran the tournament from the last arc that Baki won.
Because he basically owns like an underground fighting ring.
And he knows that the convicts have this yearning in their blood to come to Japan to taste defeat, to know what it is. And so he calls like 5 of the OGs from the old show and Baki. And then it's like, so, and haha, convicts, you other guys, no rules, whenever, wherever. We were born to be together. I'll be there and you'll be near. And that's the deal, my dear. Right? Like, he goes full Shakira on him. And to his credit, Baki in the time's like, I don't care. And
he's
just like
walks
I've
got
off.
School, guys. Like, I need to go.
Yeah, Baki's like, it's an early morning for me. I don't deuces. So like that's like the main conceit. And so it's these 5 versus these 5. Winner wins. But it doesn't define what losing is. And so, like, Spec, for example. Spec shows up while Baki is being... Baki has... Okay, one of the bullies in Baki's school just has a gun, which I would overlook if the show was set in America, because we're from Montana. You can walk into a gun show without ID and walk out with a gun inside of 30 minutes in Montana. You, like... Okay, fine. It's not hard to imagine that a high schooler in America has a gun. But this is Japan.
Yeah, it was...
Where, like, there's far better gun regulation laws. And yeah, criminality exists, but, like, this is like a freshman in high school just, like, has a gun and a bunch of other criminal friends who are willing to beat up Baki for him. They don't succeed, but who are willing to try to beat up Baki for him. So Baki's, like, dealing with that when Spec just sort of looms and then takes the gun out of the bully's hand. And to the bully's credit, Spec goes... Do you think that's going to help you? And then the bully goes, no. And then Spec goes, give me the gun. And so he gives Spec the gun. Spec shoots himself from cheek to cheek. Just cause. There's a lot of really gross teeth things in this show also, for no good reason. But Spec just shoots himself cheek to cheek and is like, okay, cool. Hey, Baki, by the way, shake my hand. Lol, JK. And, like, beats the crap out of him for like 2 seconds, and then the cops show up and Spec goes, I'll go to jail, why not? And that's where we find out that he pees real hard in a scene that didn't need to happen. Okay, I want to talk about this scene because start to finish it is the most erroneous piece of nonsense. Police commissioner, it's like, oh my god, what do I do with these guys? I don't know how to keep, like, what is going on. He goes to the bathroom. He's pissing. We watch him piss. Normal piss stream. He's deep in thought. All of a sudden, we hard cut to what looks like a waterfall and the urinal overflowing aggressively. And Spec, who is way too tall to break bro code and look left or right at the urinal, just sort of goes over and goes, hello, how's it going? And he's like, oh, there you are. And while still pissing like a racehorse, he's just like, yeah, I went to the grocery store. Here's a dumpling. And force feeds the police commissioner a dumpling without washing his hands. So that's not food safe.
True.
That scene didn't need to exist. We had already established that Spec just leaves when he wants to because we had seen him break out of the cell that he's basically calling home twice at this point. No point to that scene except Spec piss hard.
This series definitely...
I peaked like a mother.
Yeah, this series definitely tries to, like, ride this line of, like, being comedic, I think. And I think scenes like that are supposed to be weirdly comedic, but don't really land in that sense. And on, like, the topic of Baki as a character, I feel like Baki is a character that you do kind of need more context for in this season in particular, because, like, a lot of the stuff that happens here, I feel like you can be thrown into and, like, be fine with. But I think that there is a lot of character development that happens for Baki from the beginning of the series up till this point. And without that knowledge, like, a lot of the stuff that Baki does just feels weird, especially as, like, the main character.
I disagree. I actually really like where Baki's at as a starting point for a character at this point in the show. And everything that, like...
That's fair.
Especially for, like, the first, like, if you consider this the first, like, the starting point of, like, the series, it feels right. He's a high schooler who's good at a thing, who's proven himself to be good at a thing. We don't know why he's good at the thing or why he wants to be good at the thing, granted, because that was all done before. But we don't need to. He's a high schooler. He's got himself a girlfriend. He has school in the morning. He doesn't have time to play with these criminals. And so, like, he has the most human reactions out of everybody because he's the least invested in the whole fight.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely true. I guess mostly because, you know, the definition of, like, losing isn't very clear. You know, it's kind of, like, more of a admission of defeat. Whereas, like, Baki just kind of, like, gets beaten up, like, twice by these guys and, like, technically loses.
One of the other guys from Baki's team says, hey, Baki, you just lost.
But this is also, like, early enough that, like, it's kind of, like, vague. And, like, these scenes in particular feel weird to me because I feel like Baki's reactions are just so nonchalant. Like, he's not invested in anything that's going on. And I think that, like, that kind of needs a little bit more context. Just because, like, at least for me, those scenes feel a little out of character. I mean, but anyway, that's like beside the point. Like, Baki kind of takes the sideline hard in this part of the story, which is funny considering this would probably be like the first thing that most people would consume from this series. I do really like the points where Baki gets a chance to shine, but he like doesn't do anything in these first 13 episodes, does he? I feel like he doesn't even have like an actual fight.
No, no, he doesn't. The closest thing that he gets is to the poison gimmick guy. He almost does like a tag team thing, but then
Yeah.
he has the worst chord awareness in the world and just gets got. I will say, and I'll say it again and again and again. I do love Dorian. A very brief rundown of the villains in my perspective. Boring, 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 Muscle Santa, and then like Doyle has them fuck me eyes perpetually. Like Doyle's looking for something, and I don't know if it's a fight, but he's looking for something.
Yeah. I guess the other thing that I could talk about is just like the attempt to kind of have a discussion about what it means to be a martial artist. And I do think that the author for this series, well, I know that he is a huge fan of just martial arts in general, and he has studied martial arts from across the world. Like, the whole purpose of this series is kind of to take real life concepts and kind of elevate them to kind of a superhuman level. I think that's like usually the explanation for most of the techniques that are used, which I do enjoy. Like, I think most of the points where a character does a crazy move or technique, there is like this is the explanation for this technique, and then they always end up like blowing whatever the record is out of the water for doing that said thing.
Sometimes literally.
Yeah. And in that regard, like, I think he was trying to have a discussion in this part about what it means to be a martial artist in the modern world. But then what do you do when you're a martial artist and you come face to face with people that don't care about honor and don't care about the duel or like the ring or any of those things? And I think that Baki in particular just doesn't even, it just like doesn't even compute for him. He's just like, I don't even like, he's only fought in the ring, but his true motivation is to defeat his father. And like, these people just kind of show up, and I feel like he doesn't show, like, you would think that he would show more interest in the fact that these people are like challenging him. Yeah, I don't know, just like with the full context of like Baki's character, like it kind of just like falls flat in my opinion, and the real point kind of gets missed about like what it means to like lose or what it means to be a martial artist, you know.
But I will say, without the full context, it feels right for him to just be like, I don't know, you guys.
Yeah, exactly.
What? Stop it. Go. Get out of here.
But it's like early, like in the series, in like the arcs before this, like Baki literally got thrown into a war zone when he was like 13 years old and was like forced to train against like a special ops squad, just like because. And this was all in the name of him like becoming stronger, you know. So it's like you would think he would be a little bit more motivated by the fact that these people might be a challenge for him.
You know, that sounds like a Baki fan problem. If you don't care about Baki, not a problem. Yeah. Yeah. In general, I like it. Yeah. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to hit on. Dorian. I'm going to talk about him a lot because he's mostly of the antagonist for these first 13. He has a lot of moments, and a lot of them are weird. Like, he cuts off someone's hand. Just apropos of nothing. he loses an ear and is just sort of chilling. Like,
I mean, I think we can talk
he also
about
sings.
that.
Dorian sings, and I love his singing register. Like, he's a big mountain of a man. He's a beefy man. And so as a result, he has like a really deep baritone, and I really like it. I'm also a big mark for any like moment where like relatively classy music is being sung while a fight's happening. And so he's just singing while he's kicking the crap out of somebody, and it's like, nice. God, while I was saying that, I remembered the thing that I actually wanted to say before we like full spoilered. Although I'm at this point, I don't even know if there's that much plot left. There's not that much plot in these first 13.
I think really the spoilers are like who fights who and like how the fights resolve.
Oh, Dorian. So this show's a mix between everybody hard selling everything and everybody no selling everything. Like, because, and I think part of it is just the art style. Because everything is so detailed, like the fists like cave in faces, like teeth spread apart, blood comes with every blow. Everybody's fine. Like, it doesn't even slow them down. Like, people are in incredible amounts of pain and are taking an incredible amount of damage, except for when it's their turn. Like, the fights have a very wrestling, like, a real low-energy, dark match wrestling vibe, where I slam on you for a while, you slam on me for a while, I get the reversal at the end and I win, right? And it's like, there's no way you are okay. But you're chunking along and beating him up now like nothing that happened in the last 3 minutes happened, and back and forth and back and forth, and like there's awkwardly like a non-specified amount of time in between some of these fights where people like had bones broken and are now cool. Like, people take bullets to joints and are just sort of cool.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna say something about Dorian.
Was it how he too has fuck me eyes occasionally?
No.
Was it his cute little mustache?
There's none of those things. Anyway.
Was it his big wispy hair? Was it his tiny little boy shorts after his pants got burned off? There's an episode where Dorian's just running around in itty bitty like Daisy Dukes.
I remembered it was just about like I feel like when this is like drawn in a manga, like I feel like a lot of these events definitely would have been significantly faster in reality. But since like this is kind of a shonen manga, like things are just drawn out to such an extent that when like people do get hit, everything just feels that much more impactful, and you're just it's almost like they're fighting game characters. It's like they take these massive hits and then they just get back up and keep fighting.
Yeah, because the detail is so excruciating and every punch is like done to feel weighty because these are like the best of the best. It's like, oh no, that guy's dead. Oh no, he's fine.
It's almost like if someone was getting a Mortal Kombat fatality in real life, and then they just kind of stood up.
Every blow.
And then they just stand up and they're fine.
Like, every blow is like a Mortal Kombat X style crushing blow. Like, it is insane.
Okay. Well, Jack, would you add this to the list?
Not even kind of.
Not even?
Not even kind of. It's fine. There are better fight boy animes. There are better animes that discuss what it means to be fight horny. Like, I was thinking about this, like, when we talked about Vinland Saga did a very good job. Granted, we watched more episodes of Vinland Saga, and Vinland Saga, like, we started at the start of the story, because that's just when episode one
You
starts.
watched more episodes of Vinland Saga.
That's true. You've watched more episodes of Baki. But within the context of just this first season, like, Vinland Saga does a better job of discussing like what it means to like be these, like, live this sort of violent lifestyle, and like the characters had more reason to be violent in the way that they were. So when this show just sort of brings up those questions, it's like, you're not as smart as you think you are, show. Like, it gives me mad psychopaths, the main villain quoting philosophy. that like vibes where it's like get off yourself, sir. You are not the high horse and also the rider. The fights are cool. I will give the animation style for the fights a little bit more of a pass. No, they're not the cleanest. They're not the ugliest either. In a way that like it's very obvious that they didn't run out of money. Like everything feels intentional. It's just the style that they went for is sometimes not pleasant to look at.
I mean, it feels
not even in like the gory, gross way, but just like it's just, except for when they do the 3D CGI stuff, in which case that's all just.
I mean, I'm sorry, but like, I'll give the benefit of the doubt that like they might have had a pretty tight schedule, but like, I feel like they could have just hired better artists because I feel like the artists just didn't do a great job on a lot of the stills.
I feel like it was all intentional.
I mean, maybe, but some of it just looks so bad.
I mean, I think it looked like it doesn't look like they failed to meet their mark. It looks like it was intentional. Like that was what they were trying to represent, and they represented what they represented. It's just the style is bad.
Yeah, that's fair.
Anyway, look up Dorian singing. Look up Dorian on a roller coaster. Yeah, and then just don't watch Baki. Hey, Forrest. Would you add it to your list?
Well, yeah, I'm going to tell you the opposite. You should watch Baki. But not because it's good, but because it's an experience. Because, like, if you've experienced JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, I feel like JoJo's is just kind of a wild ride. Like, there's really, really good shit in there. Baki is kind of the same, but, like, Baki is kind of just more, like, martial arts oriented. So if, like, you're really into martial arts, you might really enjoy Baki. It is also just entirely toxic masculinity.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Like there's no way to like beat around it. It's like
real men don't use weapons, you see.
Why can't a woman be here and like step toe to toe with these men?
No, the only woman in the story is there for Baki to kiss.
Exactly.
No, nothing else.
And like a spoiler for like early Baki before this season, his mother is also relevant, and she's literally the person who's like throwing challenges at Baki for him to get stronger, and then she gets killed by Baki's dad. Like he straight up just murders her. Anyway, I kind of got off track. Baki is something that I would add to the list if you're into shonen. If you're not into shonen, probably just avoid it outright, because it probably just won't be for you. But this is just kind of not a definitive answer. But yeah, I don't know. It definitely doesn't do anything outstanding, but it's just crazy. It's just like, if you want to just like experience something that's just absurd and fun, I guess just watch it. I think that this in particular is kind of my least favorite portion of the story. I think everything before this and everything after this is really good. So if not for that, watch those parts. I mean, do you want me to tell you what happens in the next part?
Sure. If you don't want to know, or if you're planning on watching the next part, don't listen.
I mean, I can just give you like a brief rundown. I don't feel like going into that much detail. But the thing that you did miss, that I'm sure you would just absolutely hate, is basically
I'm a hateful boy.
So basically, the whole thing with Kozue is literally kind of leading to like Baki's big like power up moment, basically. And
oh, she's his Krillin.
And no, she doesn't like die or anything. So like I feel like the reason why Baki is just hanging out with her all the time in like those first 13 episodes is because it's just this really long-winded fucking way basically to just get to them having sex. Like he
gets powered up through fucking?
Yes. So like there's literally
no,
like so
Baki, no.
like so many people are like
It's the most incelliant interpretation of manliness ever.
Like when they're like first, like when like he's first encountering a lot of the inmates, like they're like, oh, he's just a boy still, and then like he has sex.
God, no.
He has sex with her, and then that's like his power up, because then he goes to fight Yanagi and Sikorsky, and he literally just, they can't do anything against him. Like he's just like
Christ.
like since he now is in love and he has a woman to protect and he's had sex for the first time, he is now just untouchable. Like, it's so stupid. It's literally the weirdest, just like, why is this even a thing kind of, like,
do you think
series.
Anime stays in heaven because it too is afraid of what it has created?
I mean, probably.
That is, dear.
And it, like, at least they're like the same age. Like, they're both 17.
Yes.
And it's like, it's not like weird about it, because it is like a very, like, I will genuinely say that it is kind of a like mature take on like what sexing on what having sex is.
Yeah, you go ahead and you have sexing, and then you get real strong.
But like the other part of it, the Baki part of it, is the part that's just like, why, and literally, so there's a moment where she comes into his room and she gets in bed with him, like in the middle of the night, and then Yujiro just shows up, and like
No.
and like Baki and
Refuse.
her are no, like this is before they actually do it, but Yujiro
why is Yujiro
literally Yujiro shows up and he straight up just tells Baki, you finally found a woman, and he's like, make sure you do this, because if you have a lot of sex, you will be the strongest. Like, he literally says that. He's literally like, I have done it.
Me, I fuck loads.
That's literally what he says. He's like, I have gone across the planet, and I have, like, he's like, you have to make sure that you do it at all times, when you're sleeping, when you're eating. Like, he literally goes into absurd detail.
Anime was a mistake.
And then he's like, all right, Baki, you have to do this. And then when that happens, he literally just like leaves, and then they're like, okay, so what's gonna happen? And then Baki's like,
wait, did she see him too?
yeah, she was there.
She
was there. Like, they were both like in bed, and then Baki like flips the covers up and like protects her, and is just like sitting there with her, and they're like half naked, while Yujiro is just like lecturing Baki, and then Baki's like, all right, and then Kozue's like, okay, are we gonna, like, she's like, are you gonna do that? And then like Baki's like, we will have sex, but it's because I want to, not because my dad told me to. I'm sorry that this is making you laugh so hard.
I'm so glad I didn't watch that.
It's almost funnier for me to just tell it to you, because then you don't have to experience it.
Yeah, now I don't have to be aggressively uncomfortable by it. Now I can just enjoy the fucking stupidity. Oh,
and
my
then
God.
and then they decide to meet up somewhere else afterwards, like the next day or
Which
whatever.
two?
Kozue and Baki.
And then they fuck again?
No, well, they hadn't yet, because that interrupted it. And
Okay,
then Baki
thank
was
God.
like, and then
Okay,
Baki was
okay,
like,
when
no,
she-
this isn't
when-
gonna happen tonight. And
Okay. That's a better scene because of it. It's still nowhere near a good scene. It's still an abysmal scene. But I am so glad that Baki was like, no.
And then they literally, I don't remember if they give a number, but like they end up meeting up at like the place where Baki like used to live when he was like 13, because for whatever reason Baki just knew that was where she was gonna go. Like she was like she gave him a note and was like, okay, meet me. She was like, we should meet up at some point, and then she's like running around town like trying to like, it's such a stupid scene. She's literally like, oh yeah, I left this note for Baki, like he's gonna be like going to all the places he thinks I might be, and then by the time he like actually finds me, he'll be exhausted, and I have no fucking clue why she wanted that. And then he just ends up showing up where she was showing up, and then they basically fuck like 17 times. Like they literally specified that it happened over and over and over again.
A double-digit number of times.
And then like it shows them, and they're literally just surrounded by Kleenexes.
Oh!
And just like multiple boxes of Kleenexes, and I'm just like, I'm just like, why the fuck did this have to go into such insane detail about all of this?
That's disgusting.
I know, it's just so weird because it's so particular.
God, there's such an incel through line,
and I feel like we might
life.
Just like cut this out, but
no, leave it in. I refuse.
For the people that really wanted to hear us talk about this, because I felt like Jack needed to know about this shit, because I feel like anyone that watches Baki like this, I feel like I need to hear other people's opinions on this, because I've like never heard other people's opinions on this sequence. It's just absurd. And then like this leads to Baki like getting stronger, and then he's like untouchable. Like he's just so strong now that like they can't do shit against him, because
do you think if they stopped at 16 he would still be weak? What if it was just like one very long, very tender fuck? Yeah. What if it was mostly spooning that night? Like, would he still be a weakling?
I have no clue. And then like even like later down the line, like he's just become that much fucking stronger. Basically the whole season like ends with like, so he like has a fight with Yanagi like right after that, and he gets like severely poisoned by Yanagi, because they like go into this whole like thing about how like there's a technique called the poison hand, where you basically just like shove your hand in poison over and over again until your hand is poisonous, and you just bear the pain, and then you can punch people with it, and
just
it will
always forever.
Yeah,
your hand is always on fire.
Yeah.
What the fuck?
And so, but apparently the poison is like lethal if you get like, if it just touches your skin.
Okay, but then like, then when he made contact in
it wasn't like he hadn't done it yet, so he like does it in between that fight and the next fight, and then he poisons Baki, and like basically the season ends with like Baki being like on the verge of death from being poisoned. And so then Baki, the season ends with like Baki going to China because he's like basically dying from this poison, and there's going to be a crazy tournament that happens in China once every 100 years, and
the prize is medicine.
Well, so I mean, I know what happens after the fact, because like this is like the cliffhanger is like, oh, how is Baki going to survive, because he's like on his deathbed basically. Basically like there just ends up being another poison hand user, and like he fights Baki, and like his poison apparently just like counteracts the poison the other guy gave Baki, and then
so it happens by accident.
It literally, yeah. It's really kind of stupid.
Shit like that makes me think the series isn't critical of
but
itself.
It's then the thing that makes Baki even stronger after he comes back from it, which is just absolute dog shit.
So 2 poisonings is equal to 17 sex.
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually more.
Wow.
he became even stronger because now he has the sex plus the double poisoning.
Okay, so 17 sexings plus 2 poisonings equal 1 shonen protag.
Literally, yeah.
Oh,
It was kind of just a wild ride.
thank you, listener, for joining us on this wild ride.
Yeah.
Hey, Forrest.
Yeah.
I don't have social media because I'm bad at it, but you have things.
Yes, I make music. I go by the name Bustelo. You can find me on YouTube, Spotify, Bandcamp, um, Apple Music if you want. Not that very many people use Apple Music.
Bustelo.
Yeah, what he said. And then I have a secondary project called Prismship, which is Prismship. That's just dancier, higher tempo electronic music, if that's something you're into. Thanks for listening.
Goodbye. Lead about that sex thing. It's just porn with what he just told me. Yucky and gross. Yeah. Yucky, gross, and bad. Yeah, it is like literally just. Yeah. Wait, is this even recording? Recording. I said my bit. That's all I care. We can't pretend that we didn't know that. I refuse to be culpable for tacitly accepting it.
See, I made my point. I was like, I should have just burst into the room. Like,
Yes.
Yeah. Basically, it is just absurdly way too graphic. So if you watch that, just be sure you're ready to basically watch porn.
Basically.
Basically watch porn.